Okay, thanks very much. Okay, so the first thing to say is I've done two masterclasses. The last one was on integrating mobile into multi-channel stuff, and we did some stuff on social mobile. The really interesting thing is that for the last two presentations we did, there wasn't a lot of information, and actually a lot of the stuff we had to really think and really get our ideas down into slides that we've been using year after year. For this one, actually the majority of work was trying to wade through all the information on tablets. It's such a massive industry now that the amount of reading that's gone into this is huge. So this is the best of, which I'm hoping we can do in about 30 to 45 minutes, depending on what happens, and then there'll be some questions at the end. Okay, so in today's episode, we're talking about how tablets are affecting consumer behaviour. Secondly, how they're in growing importance to marketers as well. Thirdly, how tablets should form a key part of any marketing strategy. I think there's absolutely no excuse for anybody in this room not to think about tablets in terms of a marketing strategy separately. And lastly, some case studies which show how tablets are being used really for their best attributes. I think there's tons of case studies around tablets, but we've picked out the ones which really play to tablet strength rather than they could be replicated on a smartphone. Okay, so firstly, the rise of the tablet. Are any of you familiar with Mary Meeker at all? So, okay, yeah, you probably see. Okay, so I'm not going to take you through a proper Mary Meeker deck of how the tablets have taken over the world, but there's some highlights in this and some different sources as well. But what I would really like you to take from this is that tablets are probably a bigger industry than you think. So first of all, I would say, and it's absolutely true, it's a massive and growing market. So the actual, the mobile tablet, or it's not from 1888 for the modern tablet, obviously the iPad is only 3 years old. So this is Steve Jobs standing up in April 2010, showing this to the world. And I think if any of you can remember all the hype that was around this, it was understood to be a tablet, there was mock-ups which looked very similar. And I think certainly when I was working in mobile advertising, we're looking at the tablets, there was this thought that actually it was just a bigger smartphone, and hopefully I'm going to dispel that as we go through. But really, it's only 3 years old, which is very young. But the thing is, and this is a Mary Meeker slide, is the iPad compared to the iPhone, and of course the iPad is the market leader in tablets, has grown phenomenally fast in comparison to the iPhone. I think there's a number of reasons for that. One thing is that the iPhone actually established an ecosystem of apps and touch and actually made it very simple. And actually the iPad, people already understood what the iPad was about when it came out. But regardless of that, it's actually growing faster than the iPhone did, roughly kind of 2.5 times quicker than when the iPhone was released. And tablet shipments are expected to continue growing, and there doesn't seem to be an end to this curve instantly. I think as components get cheaper, as people start to understand the benefits of tablets and start to see their friends with more of it, it's going to grow even further. And I think there's a lot of growth left in developed markets. In developing markets, there is tons of growth left. But really the key stat I'd like you to take away from the growth is that there will be over 1 billion tablets shipped in 2017. Which is massive. So bearing in mind there's only 233 million at the moment. So that is absolutely huge, and it just continues to grow. So 36% growth in that particular period. Okay, but what is a tablet anyway? So this is something that I think we as a mobile agency are thinking about more and more. There's a convergence of devices. Devices tend to fill in the gaps between other devices, and there's a very clear lineage of, say, from the smallest screens to the biggest screens. And it's actually becoming increasingly hard to define what a tablet is, and I would suggest in future, actually, the whole kind of calling things tablets might merge with laptops, might merge with TVs, might merge with smartphones, and I'll show you why. So the first thing is, how do you define a tablet? Now, it sounds like quite an easy thing, but is it a touchscreen laptop without a keyboard? Is it a big smartphone with no network capability, so no ability to connect with 3G? Or is it a large one-piece device without a mouse, which is the definition that I got off Wikipedia? Now, it's all of those, and it can be a lot more. But the thing I'd like you to draw your attention to is the Windows Surface, which looks very much like a laptop. if you think about it. And actually, one of the defining features of tablet devices is actually the operating systems. As soon as these can run, and in fact, the Windows Surface can run a version of Windows and also a version of the Windows 8 mobile system as well. So these are starting to converge, which is making it quite difficult for us to define what a tablet is. Now, platforms, and the reason this is happening is because platforms are converging in general. So, I don't know, is anyone familiar with Ubuntu Edge? No, I don't think I've seen the video. So it was going around our office, so I'm cheating because it's most of the people I work with. But Ubuntu Edge is a really interesting crowdsourced project. It's actually the largest crowdsourced project ever, and didn't meet its target of $32 million. It's got a mere $12 million backing. And the idea is that there is a smartphone which runs an operating system which can adapt to whatever screen it's used on. So here it's actually plugged into a screen, it then becomes a laptop. And I think we're going to see a lot more of this. And actually a tablet in a sense becomes a size of screen rather than just a device. You can also see this in some of the Apple products. So I don't know if any of you guys have got a latest version MacBook, but there is a section in the MacBook called Launchpad, which mimics the touch and also the iconography of iOS as well. So at that point, the UIs are starting to get close together. The actual tablets are getting faster, laptops are getting lighter. At some point, there is going to be some kind of convergence. So yeah, so we might not be talking about tablets in 2 years, which should be interesting. And actually, services are starting to blur as well in terms of screens. So I don't know if any of you guys have seen O2 To Go, which has been advertised. I think this is an amazing idea, very, very simple. So basically what you can do is if you're an O2 customer, you can register with this particular service and use your telephone number for services on other devices. Now, of course, this is very similar to Skype, but then Skype don't have the network capabilities. So again, there's a convergence of services as well. But essentially, your tablet now becomes a phone, so does your laptop, and it does everything that every other device does. So there is this cross-pollination. And again, the tablet then becomes a size screen rather than just a device of that size. Okay, so there seems to be two categories emerging of tablets. So you've got smartphones, which are generally 5 inches or less. You have phablets, which is a horrible, horrible word, between 5 and 7 inches. And then tablets are deemed to be anything above 7 inches. We were thinking about what you could have between laptops and tablets. We've got tabtops or lablets, whatever you want to call it. I hope we've just coined a term there. But you can see there's actually the difference is they're very similar devices, it's just different screens. And of course, each manufacturer wants to have its own individual kind of space within that, so they try and fill in the gaps. But there appears to be two categories emerging at the top, and I'll show this. This is to do with shipments. Well, actually, it's to do with market share of size of tablets. So this green line here is anything between 8 and 11 inches, so essentially the original iPad. Anything below 8 inches is like an iPad mini, and you can see that actually the 7-inch tablets are starting to dominate the market. I think there's a number of reasons for that. Firstly, it's much cheaper. But secondly, they're very, very good for consuming content outside of much deeper stuff like video. So there's a reason why a Kindle is that kind of size, is because it's great for reading books, it's great for consuming website material as well. So there seems to be these two. This one, which is over 11 inches, which must be massive. I don't know quite what that is. That's probably tab tops coming up. Yeah, but there appears to be 7 inches at the top, and the original kind of iPad size becoming less dominant, but still there. Okay, so a bit about Apple's dominance. I think a good analogy at the moment of where Apple are with the iPad is a bit like they were with the iPhone, say, two years ago. In that they clearly have a dominance, but it is waning over time. The interesting thing about the iPad is that they were so quick at getting out a tablet which ticked all the boxes that there are still manufacturers trying to catch up. They don't have the ecosystem, they don't have the distribution channels. They can't get it below a certain price point, and actually the iPad continues to be the poster child of tablets, but I think that will change over time. So firstly, Apple still dominates shipments, so you're looking at nearly 20 million shipments of iPads a year. Compare that to the nearest competitor, which is Samsung, just over 8 million. They still wipe the floor and they make a ton of profits, and I think in the last conference call, the majority of their profits came from mobile devices, and iPad was a massive contributor to that. If you notice, there is a significant other box, which tends to be lots of cheap devices, mostly in developing markets, and they tend to do one thing really well, but generally I don't think anyone would want to buy them in the UK. Actually, another thing to point out as well is that Amazon have got quite a small shipment rate there, so this is the global shipments. In America, they have a much larger market share with the Kindle Fire, and again, they have got a lot of room to grow, so I'd expect them to be challenging some of the Asus and Samsungs in a couple of years' time. So Apple has seen its shipments grow, so it's still growing at 247.5% over the last year in terms of shipments. However, their actual market share has declined from 58% of shipments in Q1 of last year to 40%. So they've lost 18% of market share in a year. They will come down to some kind of base level, a bit like the iPhone, but generally they are still the leaders, and you can imagine they've still got 40% market share for one manufacturer and their own operating system, which is quite important. Okay, so really 3 points I'd like to take from that particular section is that tablets have not been around long, but they've already making a huge impact, and there's definitely a consumer desire to actually purchase and use these particular devices. There's two categories emerging, but convergence might mean that those categories don't exist anymore because it becomes about screen sizes rather than the actual devices themselves. And Apple still dominates the market, but for how much longer, we'll see. But they're certainly losing their dominance in that way. Okay, tablet disruption. So quite a trendy word to use, disruption, when it comes to devices, but I quite like it. So when a device comes along, so if you imagine the tablet didn't fulfill a consumer need, really. What it actually did is it actually created a consumer need and created lots of new behaviours. So it wasn't like someone said, oh great, that tablet fulfills this in my life. Actually, people started to develop new ways of using tablets to fulfill things in their life, which I think is really important. So I think there's three areas which, and there's many areas that tablets are disrupting, but I think there's three areas that I'd like to focus on today. So the first one is around content consumption. So when I say content consumption, it's mainly around entertainment, but it's also consuming information. M-commerce, buying stuff, essentially, on a tablet. And lastly, social, how we interact with people and how we use social media. So, content consumption. This is by far, this section has had the most information on by far, because there's plenty of people who are worried about what tablets are doing to their business. There's actually a lot of reports commissioned, but again, these are the best slides that we could find. So first of all, tablets are definitely taking attention away from other devices. So this was a report from Forrester, which interviewed people who'd just bought a tablet and how they were using their other devices in comparison to what they did before they purchased the tablet. Now, 37% said they used their desktop computer less, 35% said they used their laptop less, and only 12% said they used their smartphone less. The reason being, the reason that these are particularly large is because they're used in the home, which is predominantly where a tablet is used, and also the types of content that are being consumed on desktops and laptops can very much be fulfilled by a tablet and be much more browsy. Smartphones will always have their place because they are so portable and they're really immediate for finding things. So I'm not surprised that that's slower. But basically it's taking attention from other media. And I would suggest, and I'll talk about this later as well, like the TV industry. So Kevin Spacey's been speaking a lot about the TV industry recently, and he's talked about the way that that digital is really changing the way that people consume, and you can definitely see that with tablets as well. The other thing it's doing though is adding new layers. So on top of the fact that it's taking time away from other devices, away from other medias, it's also adding layers and actually meaning that people consume more of certain content. So for instance, this is from the BBC. They said that 43% of tablet owners say they now watch more TV than they did 5 years ago. I think there's lots of reasons for that. Catch-up TV certainly helps, but we think that tablets allow people to actually consume more content as well, and actually TV programs become much more interesting when they can interact with them as well. And 83% say they use tablets alongside their TV. And later on I'll talk about the different ways in which tablets are used alongside other media, because there's not just dual screening, there's actually 4 types of dual screening, which is interesting. And mobile video, as you'd expect, is really, really important on tablets because it's the perfect medium for consuming video. So this is from Adobe, and they're saying that 32%, so 32% of people were viewing video via their tablet. PC is still really strong in this market, but that will change over time. And this is something that, this is the last slide I had. I actually added this 15 minutes before the presentation started because I found it on a news story. But I think it's really interesting to see that iPlayer in March this year, their mobile device traffic was eclipsed by their tablet traffic. So iPlayer now on mobile is actually a tablet service. And that will continue to move towards that, I think, because again, it's just the perfect way to consume that type of content. The other thing as well is it's also dominating web traffic as well. So this is from Adobe, and so basically the back end of last year, globally, tablet traffic overtook smartphone traffic. And again, if you think about the way that you use tablets in comparison to smartphones, with the tablet being predominantly used at home, that is the time when you have a lot more time to actually browse content. And that's a share of page views. And to fill this space, there's a lot of apps that have been created that actually specifically work around content and work really well with some of the tablet's attributes. So first of all, the Guardian app. If any of you got a tablet, download it. It's amazing. So really, really nice newspaper app. And Flipboard, which is one of the first apps that I saw on a tablet, which I thought actually that really makes sense. So this is essentially an aggregator of news stories, and it puts them into like a beautiful magazine that you can go through. It's your own customized magazine. And again, it plays really well to the tablet's attributes. M-commerce. There's quite a lot of information around this. It depends who you use as your source. Really depends on what kind of impact it makes. But I think all of the studies that I've read show that tablet commerce is increasing. So it's predicted in 2017 that it'll be a quarter of all e-commerce traffic. And money going through that. The other thing to note as well is that tablet users tend to spend more as well because they're generally more affluent. So it might be that percent of retail commerce, but it also means that they're actually having bigger basket sizes, that kind of thing. And in comparison to smartphones, as I'm sure you would expect, the tablet is growing at a faster rate than the smartphone. So in terms of billions, so this is actually in the US, tablets in 2016 are predicted to go to over $60 billion worth of revenue, compared to smartphones' meager $25 billion. So they're really significant in their own right. But I think, again, if you think about what a tablet does and how nice it is in terms of the shopping experience, you can see it's a much better form factor for shopping, and therefore it's going to grow at a much quicker rate as well. And they are the perfect shopping tool. I think for me, when it's done well, they combine the aspects of a magazine with a really good e-commerce store. So tablets will drive, according to eMarketer, will drive 65% of mobile commerce sales in 2013. And by 2017, a quarter of digital sales, which we talked about there, will come from mobile devices, with 3/4 coming via tablets. So again, there's another study that really shows that m-commerce on a tablet is really going to be absolutely massive, if not already. As you might expect, iPad makes up the predominant share of m-commerce sales because it's a much better experience. It's much more consistent, and I think people who use iPads generally have a much more they know what kind of experience they're going to get. But also, people on iPads tend to be surfing the web more than any other tablet device, disproportionately compared to tablet share as a whole. Yeah. The thing I would say though is that despite all of that, and that's all out in the ether, if you like, out on the web, retailers are not really backing that up in terms of their services, in terms of what they're doing. So this was a survey by Marketing Week that was done in June, and they looked at all these different popular retailer sites, and they looked at how they took advantage of the actual tablet. The tablet device and used its features. So they said that 8% of the UK's top 50 retailers have optimised their sites for tablet devices. So yes, there's another 92% who haven't done anything about that. And when you look at how that's growing, that's a really missed opportunity. 48% of retailers who have a branded mobile application let consumer. So they only 48% allow people to buy. Buy stuff through their actual tablet application, which again is like 52% of people who could add that facility in there very quickly. And then when you compare it to the amount of time that people are spending with their tablets looking on retailer sites, which is an average of 4.4 hours per week in the UK, that's a massive missed opportunity. So we expect that to improve over time, and a bit like what happened with mobile sites and mobile commerce sites, there is a definite lag behind consumer behaviour, and we think there's a number of reasons for that. One of the things is that actually it's quite a lot of investment initially, but it does pay back in time. Okay, social. So the last masterclass we did was all about social on mobile, and we touched briefly on tablets. But the thing I'd like you to take from this is that tablets are really perfect for social media because of the types of content consumption, the bigger screen, being able to interact with content and also being able to comment it on one side of the screen. It's really a great form factor. So first of all, the gap is closing between tablets and other devices in terms of access in terms of sharing and social network access. So tablets are in this light purple. So in June 2012, it was about 53% of tablet owners were using tablets to share. It's now at 57%, but the other devices are actually coming down. So tablets are slowly starting to eat away in terms of sharing, which is really interesting. And it's a hugely popular activity for tablet owners. So 57% state that they like to use their tablet for social and sharing services. It's the second most popular activity on a tablet. On a PC, it's the sixth most popular activity. So again, tablets, in terms of what they're made for, they're very much social by design. And here's something, I think people will have their own opinion on this, but if you look at some of the stats coming in around different social networks that are actually available on tablets, it seems to me that the ones that perform the best in terms of the way that they're used on tablets are really about content and about deeper engagement. So, for instance, on Pinterest, 48% of people actually on that particular platform share on tablets. Whereas if you look at Facebook, it's predominantly a mobile or a smartphone sharing service. So in this case, it rises to 66%. And I think if you look at other services like Instagram, any kind of video platform, tablets perform really well for this, much better than stuff that's much more quick fire like Facebook, for instance. Although that might change because Facebook are experimenting much more with video now, video ads, and it's likely they're going to become much more of a deeper content service in the future. And at that point, tablets really come into their own. Okay, so tablets in relation to other media. So I'll go through this reasonably quickly, but I think what's really important to understand is there's very few single screen experiences that you have in your life. So for instance, when you're at home, you're likely to have a laptop with TV, you're likely to have a tablet with a TV, and actually the single experiences you tend to have are with your smartphone when you're out and about. And I think this is really important. The best campaigns perform, or the best campaigns that I've seen that have performed really well, take account of every single touch point and actually accept that people are viewing content on more than one device, often at the same time. So, multi-screening. There's an amazing study by Microsoft. I always promote the Microsoft studies because I think they're really great. This one is it's called cross-screen engagement, where they identified 4 different ways that people are using devices. So they've got the first one's called content grazing, spider webbing, social spider webbing, and quantum. That's far too scientific. So in the spirit of brutal simplicity of thought, which is our ethos, I've called them what I think they should be called, which is parallel, simultaneous, social simultaneous, and sequential. And I hope that's much easier to understand. But basically, the key thing to say is that dual screening is not just someone with a device in front of a screen. They tend to be in different modes, and they can go between these different modes at any time. Right, so bear with me. So the first one is parallel consumption, is where people, so for instance, if someone's sitting in front of a TV, they're looking at, say, the Guardian website on their tablet, rather than actually looking at content that's related to what they're viewing. And I'll talk about the implications of that a bit later on. But basically, at that point, the TV becomes the second screen, and actually the tablet becomes the first screen in terms of what they're doing, which is quite interesting. Simultaneous content consumption is where people are viewing the same content on 2 screens at once. So here's an example that I got from the web, which is someone watching an American football game, and they're looking at the scores, and they're looking at the commentary as well. Social simultaneous is a variation of simultaneous, which is basically where you're using social media. And I think there's tons of examples where this is done really well. And I think Twitter, you can't think about Twitter and not think about what's going on TV in terms of when you're planning. Is anyone familiar with Zbox? You know? Okay, yeah, fantastic app. So this is built around TV. It pulls in all the social feeds. You can find information about it, and it's really a great accompaniment to TV, and it's very social by design. It was bought for a lot of money by Sky, actually, recently. They bought a big stake, so look out for that one. And again, that's really a really good place for advertising around TV programs, because you know that there's some social simultaneous behaviours going on there. And lastly, there's something that's not really considered in dual screening, but I think it's quite important to talk about it, is actually about sequential devices. Now, we get asked a lot about this from our clients, and there's quite a few suppliers that aim to be able to identify the same people on different devices in different channels in different ways. It's not quite there yet. It's really about probability, and you need more data to get the probability higher. But essentially, it would work like this. So you see a TV ad, you then research the product on a tablet, and then you might purchase the product on a laptop. And at that point, each screen has its own benefits. So TV ads and content consumption is by far best on a TV if you're at home. Researching a product, you've got that brochure aspect of a tablet, which is really great. And then purchasing a product on a laptop is for me much easier. If you're buying something that's quite expensive, just having the trust that it's not going to go wrong, and I think there's a certain safety with using a laptop for purchases, which I think is still really important. Okay, so the tablet has a role in each of these instances, and I think it's really important that you consider these if you're running multi-channel campaigns. So the first one is parallel, is that the tablet is often a distraction. So we're doing some work at the moment with one of our clients who runs TV campaigns to look at whether there is actually a need for a TV ad if someone's actually viewing content on their tablet at the same time. So actually there's quite a good argument for taking money off of TV when people are doing parallel content viewing, because they're not concentrating on the TV. In terms of simultaneous, adding layers, there's lots of opportunities to add layers of content, and that can be about having a great tablet site, for instance. One of the challenges with adding layers is trying to identify when people are viewing 2 screens at once, and there's challenges around that. Some people are trying to solve it. It's not quite there yet, but things like ZBox actually show intent of someone watching a particular TV program and being able to do that. Social simultaneous, well, the tablet is most likely to be used, it's actually likely to be used more than a laptop in instances of watching, say, TV programs and actually interacting via social. So at that point, is it, when you're thinking about Twitter, when you're thinking about Facebook, should you actually be thinking about the tablet device in that context? And lastly, quantum. So, or quantum, sorry, that should be sequential. So the tablet is a great discovery tool and it's a great browsing tool. And I think if you were pushing people towards a product catalogue, isn't it better to push people towards something on a tablet where they get that really nice feel? So I think if you are planning multi-channel campaigns, think about these types of dual screening, because they're not all created equal, and the tablet has its advantages in each of these instances. Okay, implications for marketers. Well, the first thing is it's really different than a smartphone. So I don't know if you guys have ever seen any of these pictures. So I remember this vividly from when the iPad was first announced, because there was lots of cynicism about what the actual device was, and they said, oh, it's basically 4 phones bolted together. It's not, actually, and I think at the time, I was quite cynical about it. I just thought, yeah, it's a bigger iPhone. It's not, and I'll show you why. But also, it never ceases to amaze me how iPads are used in the ways that phones are. So there is actually a blog called People Taking Pictures with iPads. So this is someone at a gig with an iPad taking a picture. And I think if any of you guys have walked down Carnaby Street, tourists love to take pictures with iPads. I don't know why. So what I'm saying is that it's not this, and I'll show you why. But sometimes they are used like smartphones, but that's in the minority. And I don't know why someone would have done that. It's mental. Okay, so the first thing to note is that the iPad is often, in fact, we did this with iPads, and actually, no, we did this with tablets and smartphones. The tablet is often an incremental device. Most people who own a tablet have some form of smartphone. So the thing is, don't think about it on its own. It definitely comes with the smartphone attached to it. So we've said here that this is in the UK, that of tablet owners, so there's 7.5 million of them according to TGI, 5.3 million of those people also have a smartphone, so it's the majority. And I imagine these people are older people, I would suggest, because tablets are great computers for older people. So the behaviours are actually very different in terms of tablets. There are some similarities, but generally they're much more around deeper immersive content. So if you notice, games on tablets is huge. And I think I've seen so many people playing Temple Run on an iPad, it's untrue. I don't know if people know it can do anything else. And in terms of proportion of what smartphones are used for, 24% is used for social networking. It's slightly less on tablets, but again, the amount of usage that that tablets have is so large, and games just seem to dominate everything, but it's still significant. If you notice here, utilities, you think about what a smartphone's used for, it's, I've heard tablets and smartphones described as hunters and gatherers. So if you think of what a smartphone is, it's a hunter. You want some information now, so you go and find it, you hunt it down. Whereas a tablet is much more browsy, you're much more gathering. So for utilities, it makes sense because actually that's a hunting mentality. You're trying to find what you need straight away. So consider that. Also, the timings that they use. Tablets tend to be used much more in the evenings, you'd expect, because they're in the home. Smartphones, again, tend to have like a very, very steady usage throughout the day, peaking in the evening. But if you want to get tablet owners in their natural habitat, you really want to be looking in the evening. The other thing to note as well is that, in fact, I won't do this now, but there's this thing that you can do where you give the person next to you your smartphone, and then there's just like, oh, doesn't everyone feel really anxious? Yeah, because it's the most personal device you own. It knows everything about you. It's got all the stuff you don't want people to find on there potentially. But the thing about a tablet is that they're very much shared devices, and I tend to think of tablets as belonging more to a household than to an individual. And this is actually backed up by some research from Forrester. So 59% of tablet owners share their device with someone else. I'm surprised that's not higher. I think it is higher. I think people just don't report it that much. So 49% with their spouse partner, again, so belonging to their household. 22% with children. It makes a great pacifier for children because there's lovely games that they can play and be quiet. And 9% with others, and I've lumped lots of people in there because it's kind of like work colleagues, postman, guy down the road, that kind of stuff. But generally they are shared devices, and that really affects the way that you can speak to people and the way that you target as well. Another great Microsoft study, which is called Meet the Screens. I'll touch on this very quickly because I talk about it in most of my presentations. But the tablet is known as the wizard because it can do absolutely everything in terms of its personality. Now, the key thing is about a tablet is that because they are so new, people are still trying to kind of work out what they can do. And I'm still finding interesting stuff you can do with tablets. So really bear that in mind. There's actually ways that you can suggest new ways of using tablets to people that they will do because they're still in wonderment about what it can actually do. So you can actually be very brave with your advertising on tablets. Okay, so last few moments. So here's some takeouts which I want you to take from all of that because I appreciate there's a lot of information there which I will share as a presentation to you as well. But really the key message that I think you should take from this is that you should really treat tablets as a separate strain. It's not just a smartphone. And really plan around the attributes of the tablet, which we've been talking about earlier on. Because it's really, really flexible. If you think what it can do, it can almost behave like a TV, it can behave like a smartphone, it can behave like a laptop, it can do all of these things really, really well. And when it's used well, it works incredibly well. Okay, so 5 things that I would like to leave you with is different strategies are needed for tablets, definitely. So don't lump smartphones and tablets together. I think it's very easy just to say, right, that's my mobile channel done. It's not quite like that. They're used very differently, as I'm sure you've seen. Think about usage in a home context. Even though they are mobile devices, they're not particularly mobile. Mine sits in my drawer at home or my drawer at work, and it doesn't seem to go anywhere else. Make the experience immersive in whatever you do, because you actually have that ability. And if you think about what tablet users expect, they expect to be entertained in the way that games do, and they expect to be able to touch and move things around. And when they don't get that, they get very frustrated. You can extend above the line media with tablets very easily. And I think if you look at some of the behaviours about how people are using tablets alongside TV, it makes sense. And I think, again, people expect that. It's also brilliant for reaching much harder to reach higher net worth individuals. And I'll talk a little bit later about what that means in terms of costs and stuff like that as well. What I'd say is, so consider all these stages for maximum impact. So first of all, really tablets are bigger and more disruptive than you may think. So really think about that. Just because you only use your iPad for like half an hour a day doesn't mean there's people who are really, really into it. And I think look at the stats. The stats show this is a really important computing platform in terms of advertising and content delivery. So consider tablet behaviours in relation to other media when planning. I think that's, if ever I evangelise something a lot, it's that. So what modes are they in? Don't just think, oh, dual screening. Think about what they're actually doing in terms of dual screening, what that means for all the different types of media. And then thirdly, play to tablet strengths. You know, it's really good about content, it's good with immersion. And then think about how it's different from a smartphone, because there are some similarities, but in general, there are some different behaviours that you can really take advantage of. And the thing I'd like to leave you on is, we've talked about tablets being an addictive pill. Sorry, we got into kind of the mode of trying to come up with puns around tablets. But we think that the tablet is a really important device for individuals and consumers. It's very addictive, it's very fun to play with, and we think it's going to be really important for businesses and actually very addictive in terms of their bottom line. Okay, so thanks very much.